Well, hello and welcome back to an all-new episode of Roundtable Mindset. This is Jamie.
And I'm Mahlon.
We're here. It's fall. Well, it's almost Thanksgiving. No,
it's
shit.
not. Almost Thanksgiving? What are you talking about?
See, the space-time continuum continues to mess with my world over here.
I think you're just nervous because I found a new adjective for today's conversation, which is cautious. We're having a cautious discussion on a very sensitive topic. So,
isn't that interesting? Well, and here's the funny thing. I think the reason this is a cautious, I love that. That's a good word. Thank you. Because I wasn't about to say an exciting episode because as we shared ahead of time, I'm like, yeah, this one makes me nervous. But I think the reason this is such a cautious conversation is because it's a tough one. I think this might be one of the tougher ones we've had so far this season, just because it is so full of feelings. It touches on people's values. It touches on people's emotional attachments and things like that. I think this could be a really tough conversation. So that's a good adjective.
And the people that we have involved in our conversation today, there's history there and there's mutual respect, and you don't want to damage any of that. So it's kind of like, how do you get your point across without damaging any part of that relationship, present, past, or future? So kind of adds a little bit of an element to, okay, I got to guard myself a little bit more here. So it's a very cautious way to have a discussion.
Well, and the funny thing is you and I have talked so many times about how it's easy for us to have these hard conversations because we've been friends for so long. And we have that mutual respect, but sometimes having that relationship and that history makes it just as hard as having it with someone you don't know as well. So that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, because there's some times where I can just let my thoughts and opinions just flow because there's really no thought to the other person. This conversation, I'm going to have some thought to that. So it will be a very interesting dynamic.
What's funny is how you say, I will have some thought to that. And that almost sounds like a scary proposition for a second. Like, I have some thoughts. Oh, God, help us.
Oh, I always have thoughts. I mean, let's be real. And this topic is very near and dear to my heart. So I'm very optimistic. My intentions for this conversation is to, I want positive things to come from it. Even though there might be some negative topics within it or some feelings around it that are negative, I want the overall theme and outcome to be very positive for everybody involved.
Yeah. Well, and so without further ado, maybe we introduce our guest. Our guest today is someone you've heard before, was on the podcast with us way back, close to the beginning, wasn't it? Like one of our first episodes.
Episode 6 or something like that. So we get to say welcome back. I think this is the first time we get to say it. Oh, no. Susan was the first one. So we get to say it again, though.
Yes, we get to say welcome back to my brother, Ben. Ben is also now the host of Movie RX, a podcast you can also find on any major platform. I've gotten to guest host on his a few times, so it's fun to have you back on here again, Ben. Welcome.
Thank you, and a few times. Shit. Go take a listen to my season 1 best of. Most of those are welcome Jamie. Jamie. Welcome Jamie.
To be honest, Jamie, I was asked, is Jamie leaving the roundtable? I'm like, no. She's just doing a co-host from time to time with her brother. So you've been on there, I think, more than you think you've been on there.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. I think the only person who rivals you at all is my producer, Jen, my hetero life mate. So,
ooh, hetero life mate. That sounds way better than anything I usually just call Doyle my guy. So, I like that. So, welcome back. We're talking today about, well, okay, so this is actually a topic Ben brought to us and wanted to talk about, like, American Christian persecution, or
just a light Sunday topic, just to kick around a little bit.
Right. Did you go to church this morning, Mahlon? Are you ready for this?
It's just such a breeze. I already hear the Driving Miss Daisy music in the background. Doodle, doodle, doo, doo, doo,
Right, we can just put
doo,
everything on
doo.
autopilot because there's nothing to see but the scenery passing by as we just have this casual conversation on Christian persecution.
I was going to say, let me multitask my way through this as I'm playing solitaire. No, just
Right.
Really quick though, and I'm not usually the one that puts any kind of, I don't try to anyways, put any kind of label on a conversation before we have it, or any kind of warning. But I do just want to put this out here. If anybody happens to get offended by whatever is said on here, because I know it is a very, very personal topic, I believe the intention of this discussion is more of just for seeking to understand and trying to pull out opinions on things that we're seeing both across, I'm not going to speak for you, Ben, but on my side, and I'm seeing from Ben's point of view. So there will be some topics I'm sure we will touch on that will be maybe offensive to some people. Just know that the overall intention of this conversation is not to be offensive to anybody about their religious beliefs.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. I do think what's interesting, because I'm not usually the researcher, right? But I did in preparation for this episode, I did do a little bit of research. So I have a few things to bring in as we move along through this topic.
I'm really glad about that, by the way, because
Yeah.
when we were kind of talking about the concept of this, when we were playing around with the new system that you guys have kind of started using,
Mhm.
you noped out.
Okay, let me just talk about that. Like, and I did. I totally did. I also had to make dinner. So give me some shred of credit there.
Okay.
But this is an interesting space for me to be in because you're my brother and I've known you my entire life. And Mahlon's like my other brother who I've also known almost my entire life. And so it's just like it's like that awkward conversation at the Thanksgiving table that you're not really sure how to be in.
The one that you're
at
not
the same
supposed to
time.
have at the Thanksgiving table.
Well, this is true.
Which those are my favorite types of conversations, the ones you're not supposed, I'm sorry, air quotes, not supposed to have. I love those conversations.
Yes. I don't love those conversations when they're with people that I care so much about. And you two are, like I said earlier, you two are like the two people I know with the least amount of filter. So I'm just like, oh, please still like me, both of you at the end. That's
And apparently, Ben, the least amount of credit she's giving to that we can have a civil conversation without it having a meltdown.
Well, I got to give Jamie a little bit of credit. She's seen how fiery I can get sometimes when something gets real personal. And I mean, there are some things about this topic that do get pretty personal for me in the past that were very at the time they were just disappointing. But as time has gone, it's been more infuriating than anything. But I'm gonna try to keep from blowing my gasket. So.
Well, just a reminder that if we do need to take a break because it is so passionate, and again, I call that passion, Ben, right? Like, so you have a lot of passion on this topic, so do I. If our passion gets to be too much, maybe we just put a pause and say, let's take about a 5-minute breather, and then we can always come back together.
Yeah, take the dogs out.
Exactly. Hey, if you wouldn't mind doing me and our listeners a favor, since you brought this topic to us, would you mind just kind of going through really quickly what you were thinking and kind of set the stage for what we're going to have a discussion around?
Okay, so I mean, it kind of starts a little bit with, I mean, there's been things since this time, but kind of where this showed up on my radar was right around, I think it was right around 2010. I was working in a grocery store called Hy-Vee. For those that don't know, it's a pretty big deal in the Midwest, in the lefter Midwest.
What is the lefter Midwest? I didn't even
Look at the map. Look at the Midwest. We are on the left edge of the Midwest. We are the lefter
Okay.
Midwest.
Okay, lefter Midwest.
Yes, we are in the lefter Midwest. So it's a pretty big deal here. For some that are a little bit more national, it's like a Cub or a Publix, but they have a lot of very specific departments and everything. Well, I was working in the cheese department. I was a cheese specialist. it is as amazing as it sounds. Like, it is the coolest job on the planet. You get to eat cheese, cut cheese, and talk cheese all day long. It's awesome.
I'm laughing so hard, Ben, because my daughter had a boyfriend who was also like the cheese czar of his Hy-Vee store. So I
Are you
absolutely
serious?
know what you're talking about.
Mhm.
And it was amazing because he always brought us the best cheese. There's still a
Mhm.
garlic Munster cheese that I had that I still dream about. So I completely understand what you're saying.
Everything that you can learn from a cheese specialist is just like, I mean, seriously, you don't. I'll try to stay away from cheese education in this conversation, but yeah, I learned a lot. I mean, before I was a cheese specialist, I called Parmesan sprinkle cheese, like, just to give you an idea.
That's quite the curve there, Ben. I'm glad you.
Huge curve. But
You've grown so much.
I was working in the cheese department, and I was cutting up some cheese and putting it out in the bunker and everything. And I heard a conversation between two old ladies. Now, I say old ladies, they were probably like in their 40s or something, but anytime people start talking snootily about religion and things like that, I automatically just think that they're 25 years older than they are. So, like, I say two old ladies, they were probably 40, but they were 65. Well, they were talking about this brave man and how brave he was for doing what he did. And like, I hadn't heard most of the conversation because I was pretty busy. It was a Sunday afternoon, and one of them had mentioned that you just don't see bravery like that anymore. And I was really curious as to how this man was so brave. So I asked, what happened? And they told me that, well, there was a man that had knelt on the football field to pray to God, and that it was just so inspiring for young Christians everywhere because it was such a brave act. And I was like, well, where did this happen? I was expecting this to be like, like a soccer thing, like in like Egypt or something, like football or whatever. But they said it was in Colorado. Okay. And so, like, I asked, I was like, is there like a sect of anti-Christian people in Colorado that I wasn't aware about, like this giant movement of anti-Christian people in Colorado? And this is where I started to get a little annoyed. They looked at me like I was stupid. And they said, no, but Christians are persecuted every day in this country. And I just kind of stopped and thought about it. And I was like, Christians are persecuted every day in America. And I didn't understand what they were talking about. So I'm actually running through the definition of persecution in my mind, trying to figure out, hostility, ill treatment on the basis of ethnicity, religion, political beliefs, those kind of things. And I'm like, hostility or ill treatment. So I asked, I was like, did they boo this man for praying? Or did somebody threaten him or something? And then they just made me mad by looking at me like I was stupid again. So like when they left, I turned to my coworker and I said, were they really just pretending that Christians are persecuted in this country? And then she looked at me like I was stupid and said, Christians are persecuted everywhere, every day. And so I failed to see where this persecution was coming from, specifically in America. I understand that there are places all around the world that it's a little dicier, but specifically in America.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in here, Ben, so I can start giving kind of my 2 cents.
Mhm.
I think it'd be helpful for us to kind of define when we say persecution, because I think that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And I'm glad you started kind of zeroing in on the geographic area, because again, if we talk globally, there's no, I don't know, maybe I'm speaking for you. Do you recognize Christian persecution that happens in other countries outside of the United States?
Oh, of course.
Okay.
I mean, there's persecution against all religions if you go to, if you go to the
Absolutely.
right place in the
Yep.
world.
Yep. I just want to make sure. So, from a global perspective, we can both agree that Christian persecution takes place.
Mhm.
What I want to do when we start this is, what does Christian persecution mean to me? So I'm just going to go through the definition that I kind of put together based off of my understanding of what I would recognize as Christian persecution. I'm curious if we would share the same definition or if you have a different lens to that as well. So for me, Christian persecution is the mistreatment or hostility that Christians experience due to their beliefs and faith in Jesus Christ. There's a lot of different examples that could be around what would be, constitute persecution. But at the highest level, that to me is what, Christian persecution would be. There's a lot of layers to it, but I just try to stay at the 30,000 foot view to start with.
Mhm.
So from that kind of viewpoint, do we agree on what Christian persecution is, or is there something that you want to add or want to maybe change from your perspective?
Well, I mean, the only thing that really kind of it almost becomes semantics is specifically Christian persecution versus persecution. Religious persecution is a thing, and I think that that's a big part of the discussion, specifically with Christian persecution in America. And so, like, yes, I do agree with your assessment, your definition of Christian persecution, but I don't think that putting specifically Christian in there is terribly important.
Well, I do agree with you that there is religious persecution that happens. I think Christian persecution is where you're having, from my understanding of the example that you gave, it was Christians being persecuted in the United States. So
Mhm.
to me, religious persecution, I agree. There's other religions that get persecuted all the time in the United States and outside of. That's my belief. If we're going to focus in on Christian persecution, I do have a lens on that to say Christian persecution happens in the United States. To the severity that happens outside, no, but it still happens. And so that's what my next thing is. Like, I don't want to, if we hone in on Christian persecution, and maybe that's the start of this conversation, and maybe we branch out, or maybe we just go ahead and do religious persecution. From a Christian lens, though, there are times that I would recognize what's happened to me, what's happened to loved ones, what I've seen with my own eyes to other people that I don't even know who profess to be a Christian. There is persecution that happens within this country. Now, do I think, like I said, it's to the severity that happens in other countries? No, I know other countries sometimes put people to death for just being a Christian, or they have them kicked out of the country, or they imprison them for the rest of their lives because they are a follower of Jesus Christ. That I do not believe happens here in the United States to the severity that it happens in other countries. So for me, when I say, Christian persecution, I want to hone in on that because that seems like in your story, the one piece that you were like, now, wait a minute, that doesn't really take place here. For me, I'm just going to run through a high level list of things that I was thinking about. And I've gone to Google, I've done some, other research. I've kind of looked through some case files around, religious beliefs specifically for Christians. And so I kind of pulled together all these terms to kind of give me a place to start from.
Mhm.
So here are some things that I would identify as someone being persecuted for being a Christian. And I think they do apply for other religions, but persecution could take the form of being isolated from friends, family, and communities, being denied access to basic needs like food, water, and healthcare, being imprisoned, being subjugated to violence, abuse, being discriminated against at work or at school, or being at risk of sexual violence or torture. So those are kind of some examples of what it would look like for me. I would recognize, and every one of those bullet points, there's probably an array of other examples that we could put underneath each of those umbrellas. But if I started coming down out of the 30,000 foot view, this would be the 10,000 foot view of buckets that I would understand circumstances that you could say Christians are being persecuted.
Right. Now, my question is that I mean, if you run through that list, what are some examples of those things?
So for me, I have 3 examples that I did kind of research. I think this is a well-known case. It happens to come out of the a lot of these actually come out of the state of Colorado, which is funny because that's kind of where you
ironic.
started the conversation, right? Like
Coincidence, yeah.
That's kind of interesting. Yeah. The first one I want to talk about is, we all remember Jack Phillips, the cake artist?
A little bit. Was it the man who had tried making a cake for a gay couple for their wedding?
So yeah, this case was back in 2012, and you're exactly right. It was about Jack Phillips. He was the cake artist that was in Colorado that refused to make the cake. You're exactly right. I don't want to go through the entire case, but I think what's really important with this one is what kind of happened to him after and during. And so I would look at that as part of his persecution for being a Christian and for kind of holding to his values and his beliefs. And, it had a real big impact to his business. It had an impact to his friends, to other social activities. And so to me, that's a form of, Christian persecution. He's being persecuted for his faith.
I don't know that it could really be persecution for his faith as much as for his decisions, how to run his business. Because, I'm with you in the aspect that if I was a man in love with another man and I was going to get gay married, I wouldn't go to somebody like that for a wedding cake. If somebody told me, I'm not going to make a cake for you because you're getting married to another man, then I would say, well, I don't want your damn cake anyway. And I would go somewhere else. That's the wonders of capitalism, is that you can choose where you go to get your services. Now, I don't know that that's a measure, so that the persecution is so much a measure of him being attacked or persecuted for his beliefs, as much as maybe a response from the majority of a state that is largely more considered left, responding to somebody finding out that somebody is unwilling to make a cake for a gay couple, saying, oh, well, that's where we're not going to go to get cakes then, because I don't agree with his values. So is that really persecution, or is that somebody making a decision that I'm not going to go to this place to get their services because I don't agree with how they run business?
Well, if they just decided not to go to the store, I could maybe understand that. If this wasn't taken to court, or if this wasn't years, and when I say years, like decade of this fighting, constantly going back and forth. And in the article that I found, it said that, there were months of repeated harassment, and increasingly, I'm reading the article here. After months of repeated harassment, increasingly bizarre and perverse cake requests, the trans activist who had requested the gender transition cake filed a lawsuit against Jack Phillips. So this is all happening because he won't make a cake, but he won't make a cake. Why? Because it's against his religion. It's against his faith.
I just have a thought. We're talking about Christian persecution, but the original persecution was based on someone's sexuality. And so I guess to me, I think that it's okay that this guy was harassed for months after this? No, it's fine. I'm not disputing that at all. But at the same time, the original persecution wasn't to him. Like, the original persecution was done by him to someone based on their sexuality, which is also a form of persecution.
Right.
Well, yeah, but and that's you have a valid point, and I can't argue that. The fact that he doesn't want to, if I was put in that spot, though, I would want the ability to be able to practice my religion and to be able to hold my faiths dear to me and not be forced to do something that goes against those beliefs. As unbelievable or as ugly as maybe the secular world would look at that and say, well, that's disgusting. If that's his religious belief, he should be able to have the right to say, I can make a cake for who I want to based off of my religion. I'm not doing it for a same-sex couple.
And I think that's perfectly reasonable. Now what leads me to question why this got to where it was, and it's probably something that none of us would ever know without being a part of the situation or actually being there, was the legal response and the social response, was that due to his refusal of business, or was that due to his method of refusing business? Like, I feel like the vast majority of people, of transgender or gay or lesbian people that I have met, would be far more reasonable if somebody came to the counter and said, "Hey, I'm really sorry to do this to you, but my faith does not allow me to acknowledge what it is that you're doing, and I can't provide a service for you, but I can offer other people that I have worked with or whatever in the past, that these are some other options that you can go to, but it's just not at my establishment, and it's because of my religious beliefs." Most people, I think, would be perfectly accepting of that reason. What I'm wondering is if this guy was just being a prick, like if he was being an asshole when denying service and being like, like you get your whatever out of here, and I'm not doing that gay shit or whatever. And if he was rude about it, then that I could see definitely sparking somebody being like, you know what, if that's the way you're going to be, then we're going to turn it around and we're going to make it something big.
Yeah, so I'm going to say something that I want to make sure that I'm heard clearly before, because
Right.
it's not black and white. For me, the Christians that I know, and Christians are not perfect. Christians sin. Christians are bigots. Christians are murderers. I mean, Christians are not any different than anybody else other than their belief in Jesus Christ. I just want to get that out there, because what I'm about to say is then I could see them being like, ugh. But the Christians that I know and the Christians that I try to be, I can't imagine that a same-sex couple came in and just hatred and bigotry came out of his mouth in the name of religion. Has that happened in the past? Absolutely. I just can't imagine that happening in a cake shop in Colorado. It could have very much happened. I wasn't there, Ben. I don't know.
Right. Well,
What
and
I
that's my point, is that we don't know how this started.
Right. But what I do have is an article that kind of reported on how this kind of began. Now, it's just one article. I wasn't there, but this is kind of what I'm gleaming from. And the article says, Jack was first taken to court by the Colorado Civil Rights Commission in 2012 when he respectfully declined to bake a cake for a same-sex wedding. The couple pursued legal action against Jack despite his offer to serve them anything in the store and his recommendation of other cake shops that would gladly take their order. To me, that sounds like exactly what you were trying to describe is what happened. But again, I wasn't there firsthand. I'm just going off of articles.
Right.
So,
yeah. And I mean, if that's the case, then I mean, I don't understand their drive for making a political thing out of it. Besides that, I mean, they got an organization involved that is that equality is something that they kind of specialize in. But I mean, me personally, if I had the choice to go to a shop that was refusing service to people because of their religion, sexual orientation, things like that, I would just politely refuse. I'd say, sorry. I mean, I get what you're doing, but I'm not going to give you my money. So.
And that happens all the time, And
but as a business owner, why would you turn away money like that? That's the thing for me. That's just really kind of, I don't know.
Because I can answer that, being from a family that had their own business as well as being a Christian and coming from a Christian home. There are some things that are worth more than getting money from a paying customer, and that is principle, and especially when it's around your belief and your belief structure. There's not amount of money that if it goes against the teaching of Jesus Christ as a Christian, there's no amount of money that I want to take that would make me want to compromise those beliefs. And in this particular case, I can see him holding to it, even though it had 12 years of this battle case. And my point to bringing this up isn't to really focus on the case, was just to show like how much this person went through, and all he did was deny service to someone because of his religious beliefs. That's
right.
it.
After denying somebody service because of their sexual orientation.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, and from I understand your standing on principle and things like that. But as an example, say all those years ago, say that I came into your family's restaurant, and I was wearing a pentacle around my neck and and some kind of Norse T-shirt, showing that I was following a different religion. Would I be denied service at your parents' restaurant?
If I personally knew you, Ben, and we have the history we do now, I probably wouldn't turn you away, no.
Right.
But I probably wouldn't charge you, or I'd give you a reduced count because you're an old family friend.
Right. So how much of that is more personal than it is principle? Like, you know that even though I am not a Christian, that I still do my best to be a good person, that I help those around me when I can. I treat people with respect. I treat animals, all of nature with respect, all of what you would call God's creation with respect, as much as I can. And I try not to leave turmoil behind me. You know that I'm a good person despite the fact that I'm not a Christian. That somehow changes the way that you feel about how you would provide service to me. So is it unreasonable to think that people going into an establishment looking for a cake, being denied service, feel like that they're being personally attacked by somebody who just simply doesn't know them? They may have been really good people, but being denied service because of their orientation is, at that point, it's not about who they know, it's who they are. So that's almost a personal attack.
Well, and to be clear, just because someone's gay or in a same-sex relationship or marriage doesn't make the person good or bad.
Right.
Because if that was the case, all of our actions would make every single one. There'd be no classification, in my opinion.
But by denying them service would imply that they are bad.
No, it had nothing to do with them. It had everything to do with his personal beliefs. So to answer your question probably more completely, you come into my establishment, and let's just say I'm a baker. You want me to bake you a cake for, there could be a reason why you want to have a celebration that goes against my religion. If it's to the point where it's going against my faith and it's going against God's teaching, I would probably deny you, even though I knew you, because I don't want to have to make a cake for something like that. And that should be my right. Right. Like just as much as I hear what you're saying is that couple came in and felt personally attacked. Well, whose rights should be compromised in order for the other one to feel good? Shouldn't they both be able to have their rights?
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing you say,
how would that be possible for somebody to say, like, I mean, what about making a cake makes it against their religion, though? I mean, did they put, depictions of
I have no
male
idea.
and male fellatio on the cake?
I have no idea.
What is it that made it a gay cake? What is it that made it a transgender cake? To me, it's just a cake. I'm making a cake for you, and whatever. I mean, if I put a message on it, then hey, I'm willing to make the cake. I'm willing to decorate it, but I'm not willing to put that message on it. Can we do something different?
And maybe that was the drawing. I don't know. I don't know what was on the cake. I don't know if they wanted something written. I don't know. What I do know is because he stood up for his faith, 12 years of legal battles, his reputation was dragged through the mud. He probably lost business. Now, again, from a business side of view, as a business owner, because I said earlier, I come from a business owner, you could deny customers for any reason you wanted, but that does not going to make a very successful business. And eventually people will stop shopping there. Okay. Right. But if it is based on faith, which I believe Jack Phillips made that determination based off of his Christian religious beliefs, he should be allowed to do that. And I think what was really telling in this article is that he even tried to sell them other items in the shop. It's just, I'm not going to make a cake for that event. And even tried, it sounds like, getting them recommended other cake shops that they could go to that would probably make the cake for them. So he even was trying to help them find another baker who would fulfill their order for them. That all seems reasonable to me. But the whole point I brought this up was, to me, this is for 12 years he battled. I would say to some extent, he was persecuted for his religious beliefs.
What do you think, Jamie?
Well, I was going to say, I think what's interesting is that I think you're both right. And I think what's interesting about this topic specifically is that and Mahlon, you and I have kind of talked about this a little bit here and there. I think you're right. I think Christians are treated. Oh, not all Christians. That's the other thing. I guess it's not everyone, right? But I think that there are instances where Christians can say, hey, I was persecuted here. This is a space and a place where I was treated differently because of my religious beliefs. I also think that there are lots of places where that persecution may be a matter of, I don't know, perspective, a matter of mindset. Because if I think about in high school, do you remember the Jesus freak movement? Do you remember that? There was this whole thing about how, it was almost like that's where the narrative started, that we're different and we're supposed to be different and the whole world looks at us differently and I'm going to be a freak for Jesus. And it almost built community, it built camaraderie. And I think that there is some psychological value to that. And back then we were in high school at the time, but if I think about it, I feel like that has grown to this space where that is part of the narrative now. Like the idea that we can't elect certain people because they're going to attack my religious freedoms, or like this fear that somehow my security and my right to practice the religion that I choose is at risk. And I don't see that anywhere. You know what I mean? Like I don't see where that's happening. And so I think this is an interesting conversation for me to listen to because I think you're both right. And I think you're both a little wrong maybe, but I can see both sides of it. I guess my thought goes to a bigger space as to why do we have to go to a space where this becomes identity? You know what I mean? Like this person may have treated me poorly because of my religious belief, but that doesn't mean that the whole world is against me. You know what I mean?
Right. And maybe somebody does when, like in Jack's case where, it feels like the whole world is against him. And maybe a good portion of it is because a lot of people, I think, feel very much that, I mean, it's just a cake. But I think that a lot of it goes beyond these individual instances. Like more specifically, like going back to the example that I gave for why this kind of got onto my radar, how were those two women persecuted for their beliefs? They were talking openly in a busy grocery store about being Christian and about how they are persecuted for their beliefs. People who are persecuted for their beliefs don't speak openly about being persecuted for their beliefs in public unless they've got strength in numbers and they're ready to fight somebody. I guess it seems like it's, especially with the example that I gave at the beginning, it feels very detached from whatever it is that they feel like they're being persecuted for. They're sure not showing an example of somebody being persecuted for it.
So to go there for just a second with your example, and you said you were pretty young when you were at Hy-Vee, didn't you? Didn't you say 19? Was it 18 or 19?
Me? Oh God,
yeah.
No, I was 30.
Oh, okay. I thought you were younger.
It was Tim Tebow. Do you remember Tim Tebow?
Oh yeah. I remember Tim Tebow.
It was Tim Tebow.
Well, I think there's a couple things that we have to keep in mind. I think that, perspective matters for each of these individuals, right? Because I agree with you. Some people might think, well, it's just a cake. I guarantee you for Jack, it wasn't just a cake. For those two women who you said they were probably 40. They seemed 60. Let's give women the benefit and say they're 40. Just, I don't know what they were, but they were 40. But in their 40 years of experience in life, they've seen changes happen. I can only imagine, because in my 45 years of life, I've seen things change, right? I'm like, oh, I remember. Never thought I'm not going to be one of those old men that's like, back in my day. And here I am saying, back in my day, we never had to have, we never had A, B, C, D. We never even thought about it. So to me, those comments, although I was not there, you were, what makes me kind of go in my mind to say is maybe they're looking across their lifespan, and they were saying, never once in the environment would anybody even care if somebody prayed on a football field. And now suddenly, in that context, in that time, that was a big deal. That was a big enough deal that it seared itself into these two ladies' minds, where they were talking about, wow, Christian persecution, and good for him, and what a hero. That's the best I can come up with. The other thing that I want to touch on here, Ben, is, and I'm going to share a very personal story. Didn't happen to me. It happened to my daughter, and I was a bystander to it. So I got to see the heartache and the hurt and the destruction that was done to her while she was in school. Now, these were by other kids. I will tell you that my daughter, I know you don't really know her, but she is very caring. She is very loving. She is very smart, and she is very much a Christian. She is she is more outspoken about her faith than I have been in my past, which she's taught me a lot of things about being open with your faith and putting yourself out there. And my daughter was being my daughter, and she entered high school. And one of her greatest loves was to do show choir and to do play and acting and singing. And she came into the high school with bright eyes and big ideas and dreams, and everybody was her friend. And for a while, everybody was her friend, until she started talking about her faith. She started talking about being a Christian. She started asking them questions about things they were doing with crystals, or she was overhearing them doing, binding spells on people, or they were going to go do drinking or having, some of them were experimenting with drugs, and there was a pregnancy scare. And so my daughter's in the midst of all of this, and this is her community at school that she's building. And very short order, she comes from being accepted to being not tolerated. And that probably took a course of about a year. Then we enter sophomore year. Sophomore year she was kind of put on the outside of this community, kind of kept at bay. Yeah, don't be careful what you say around her, because, yada, yada, yada. And that was the year that she was starting to feel, I'm going to use my words, invisible and didn't matter. Mm-hmm. That probably happened the rest of her sophomore year. Her junior year was when things really, really took a hit. Now the kids were no longer just not tolerating her. They were trying, in my opinion, to get her to go away. So from day one of practice, actually, that happened in the summer before she was a junior, there was the constant ridicule of being a Christian, openly ridicule. There was making fun of her for going to church. There was Bible references made and laughing and mocking. There were people starting to spread that she was homophobic because she was a Christian, and she hated all gay people. There was even a social app that they started a page about my daughter, and all of it was lies. She had some of her really good friends that were gay kids, and it didn't matter to her what their sexual orientation was. They were just her friends. All those relationships went away, and she was left alone. She was targeted, and it nearly broke her spirit. At the end of junior year, I remember, through a lot of tears and a lot of heartache, that fire that was in my daughter's eyes were gone. And in its place was pain. pain that I couldn't take from her, pain that I didn't even understand because I've never gone through that as being a Christian.
Right.
And so, when we have these conversations, and I know I've gone really personal, and I didn't mean to share as much as I did. That has been the strongest form of persecution that I've ever seen from being a Christian. And then I look across my lifespan, when I was in school, I never would have dreamed of half the stuff these kids did to her. And I can confidently say 99.9% of it was because of her relationship with Jesus Christ and her profession of her faith that put a target on her back. And so I have other examples, but I just kind of wanted to bring that personal one out just so we can talk through it, because in the scheme of things in school, other kids probably didn't even see it. The teachers probably didn't even see it. But to my daughter, her entire world was on fire because of it. And so it mattered. It mattered to her. And I just kind of want to leave that there because, yeah, we can talk about these things. And to the people that are outsiders looking in, it's just a cake. It's just drama class. It's just show choir. But to the people that are in it, it is so much bigger than that. It's their world.
Right.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Mahlon. That's
First off, my heart breaks for Madison. I'm appalled that she had to go through something like that. Sometimes it's really difficult to see what exactly it is that you do to a person until they leave themselves vulnerable before the people they trust. And the fact that she was that we'll call it attacked by people who she had previously put trust in it's heartbreaking. So I don't know if your daughter is a listener. If she is, my heart breaks for you, Madison. I'm very sorry you had to deal with that. That's awful. Now, on the other hand of that, and I'm not minimizing her experience, and I'm not excusing the other children, because that's not okay for anybody. That kind of treatment of other people is wrong in any facet. What I have noticed growing in people is a defense. There is something that I have experienced a lot in life, that I'm told that I'm a horrible person because I don't believe in God. That I am consistently being pounded over the head with threats of going to hell because I'm not a Christian. At one time, I was affiliated with a pagan bookstore. They sold tools and books and knowledge, things like that, for people of alternate religions. And I've been there. I've been where Madison has been. And for people who have gone through that for so long, having to sleep in their non-Christian religion bookstore overnight just to make sure that nobody throws a brick through the window. When you're denied housing twice confirmed, when you're denied a job once confirmed, like you really do feel a lot of that pressure from people who are pushing an agenda that is theirs onto you. And I think that for non-Christians, it's become a reactive mechanism for protection, for self-preservation. I am now non-religious. I consider myself, my religion is to be a good person. Previously, I had been what most people call pagan, and I've in the past had to hide my religion because of things like being able to find a place to live. And so luckily I kept enough people around me that were like-minded enough that I didn't have to worry about being ridiculed for my faith. I had a really, really great friend in high school. He was a pastor's son. His name's Brock. Super great guy. Very, very devout. And he knew that I wasn't Christian, but he and I were both able to come to a level that just because we don't believe the same thing doesn't mean that we can't have a mutual respect. And I'm really sorry that Madison couldn't find that, because I had that, you know.
Well, and don't you think, I mean, to me, just listening to both of you, persecution's bad.
Right.
And quite frankly, what makes me so sad is that these things happened. These things happened when we were in high school too, but they happened in this space. They happened in a box. They happened in a time, and you knew if you could just get through that time, it was going to be okay, right? Like if I could just, it'll be forgotten about in a week and they'll make fun of somebody else for something else next week, right? What's interesting to me is how different it is right now. And I think that is a symptom, personally. I think that is a symptom, maybe a symptom of the absolute polarization that has happened in this country. So we have a group of people who say, I'm being persecuted because of X, Y, and Z, and this becomes huge. And then the whole world is against them. And then you have a group of people who also feel persecuted by this other group of people who feel persecuted. And all of a sudden, everybody's persecuted. And my question is it really persecution? I was reading, I can't remember if I was reading an article or if I had seen it on a video, but there was a pastor who had said something to the effect of a shift away from preferences that follow your belief is not persecution. So, for instance, a few years ago, there was the whole Starbucks thing. Remember the Starbucks Christmas cups and the massive amount of craziness that came along with that, right?
Yeah.
And I heard a lot of, Christians are being persecuted. Christmas is on trial, and they're taking Christmas away from Christians. And it was a cup from a
cup
retailer,
with a pagan
right?
goddess on it, by the way.
Right. Well, but those are the kind of things that I wonder, like, is that really persecution? Is that really a space where either the country just isn't, it's fine. Put a snowman on a cup instead of a manger, whatever the deal was. I can't remember what it was exactly, but a shift from preferences, because really around 2/3 of the country profess Christianity on some level. It is the massive majority in our country, people who profess some level of Christian belief. That doesn't mean that it's being, I guess, taken away. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that's kind of my thought.
So I'm going to hit a live wire here. So I need both of you just to kind of hang with me for just a second. Okay. I promise, Jamie, hang in there.
Okay.
I think in the name of tolerance, there have been things that have been able to be taken away or minimized from the Christian faith. One, since you touched on Christmas, one that just comes to mind is growing up, Merry Christmas. It was everywhere. People said it. It was on Christmas cards. Nobody even thought about it. Now, and I can't even tell you because I'm one of the people that refuse to take Christ out of Christmas, because that's the whole reason, right? Not everybody's a Christian. Not everybody recognizes Christ. So we need to say happy holidays. Well, that's fine. You say happy holidays. I cannot tell you how many times, though, that I get corrected, or I get, not in an argument, but it almost pauses people, because they'll say happy holidays and I'll respond Merry Christmas, or I'll even come to them and say Merry Christmas. And they'll say, don't you mean happy holidays? Nope, I mean Merry Christmas. And so even those subtleties have started changing the landscape. So in America, I would classify that as a very loose, again, there's some people who lose their life for being a Christian. They are truly persecuted, right? Let's get that out of the way. But I think persecution happens on a variety of different levels. And we've been fortunate up to this point in America to be almost immune to that persecution. And I think it's starting to leach in, and it's leaching in the most subtle ways. And I think it's coming in with the guise of, because who can argue? Well, tolerance, yes, everybody needs to be tolerant of everybody. Well, yes, until it hits a certain degree. And I'm making that statement with this example. I know a lot of Christians who say happy holidays, and that's not going to be a make it or break it if you're a Christian or not. But what my point is there's things that, we have to make concessions for, and we have to start changing. And I would argue why. Why, as a Christian, do I need to even think about how I address somebody? A merry, meaning positive, loving, have a great season. Why was that even being considered, I don't want to say hate, because that's not hate, but not being tolerant of somebody when that's my greeting? That's what my faith tells me. That's what I believe. It's Merry Christmas. And tradition. We haven't even gotten to tradition. That could be traditionally what we've been doing.
Well, I think one of the interesting things that I found out about that whole Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Hanukkah thing, there's a man, he's passed now. His name was Paul. We all know Paul because we all worked with him at one point.
Oh, I know Paul.
Yeah. Paul and I
Harvey.
got along.
That's okay.
And that's
No. Paul and I got along really well because we were both kind of outsiders in our experiences with work and the holiday controversy, in air quotes. We had both sat down and done some research in the break room, and we found out that what is politically and socially correct to do is to wish people whatever it is that you celebrate. So if you're Christian, you wish people Merry Christmas. If you're Jewish, you wish somebody Happy Hanukkah. And you just respond with how you celebrate. So Paul and I made it a point that during holiday season to not complain about all of the customers that were in the store, because that was, we hated working that season.
Retail.
But instead, because I wasn't religious, and I'm a great big giant nerd, I celebrate what I call Sithmas. The Sith are the bad guys in the Jedi and Star Wars stuff. So I celebrate Sithmas. I have, I'm going to have a tree with red lights, and it's going to have a Darth Vader or a Darth Maul on top of it, because he's an angel of death, that kind of stuff. Well, I would wish Paul Merry Sithmas, and he would wish me Happy Hanukkah because he was Jewish. And so I think that if we could somehow go back to that original way that it's supposed to be done, then I think that would make things a whole lot easier. It was the purpose for it was so that you are doing what's true to you, but you are also educating the other person in what it is that you observe.
Well, and I think the other thing that's always interesting to me is how steeped in our own perspective we can be as people, and how even this summer there was a massive amount of pure persecution that happened to a single individual named Dylan Mulvaney. And Dylan Mulvaney pulled off of all of their social media, they were a social media fan or a social media influencer or whatever, content creator that came under a great deal of scrutiny because of a commercial, and really had to pull way back. And that's a big, big example, but I see it all the time. There have been, I can tell you 3 or 4 content creators that I have followed that just suddenly disappear one day. And when I realize I haven't seen their videos in a while, or I haven't seen them put out anything in a while, and I go looking, there is a final video on their TikTok, the only one on their TikTok, and it's, hey, I need to take a break off of here because it's gotten too hot, because people have been really unkind and mean. And, I feel like so much of that comes from being stuck in your own experiences and stuck in your own perspective and not being able to tolerate or listen to someone who has a differing perspective. And I think I feel like that's a key in this, is that, if I had a friend who was telling me that they were being persecuted, I guess my question would be, was there an original persecution? Were you canceled because you were trying to cancel someone else? You know what I mean? Like this cancel culture thing. If you look at all of it, it is all so political. It is all so divisive. And I guess I don't understand. I don't understand why I can walk away from someone saying Merry Christmas to me and not say a word about it. Thank you. Merry Christmas to you too. I don't profess Christianity as my religion, and I can say Merry Christmas to someone else and it's not going to hurt my feelings. And if someone says Happy Holidays to me or Happy Hanukkah, I'm going to say the same back to them. Like, why does it have to be such a big deal? I don't understand. And I do think that there are exceptions. I think that, for instance, Mahlon, your story about your daughter, that's not stuff that can just roll off your back, right? But it's also not stuff. These things that I'm talking about are things that seem to start fire for these things. It's like a lightning rod for this massive movement of, oh my gosh, look at all the things that are terrible about the world. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I think from a Christian point of view, for me, and it's funny, I have a story. I found two cases. I want to share just highlights from them. One, talk about a political. I have one. I've never heard of this, but it's Arlene's Flowers. Have you ever heard of this back in 2013 in Washington?
Tell me more. I do feel like it sounds familiar, but I can't remember.
So before I forget, so there's one article that I'm going to share now where you'll see that the people that were involved in the incident, I don't think there was an issue between them. It was politicians who got involved who made it an issue. And I'm going to share that with you here in a second. The other one that I want to touch on is a Christian who was, because of a law that was passed in Colorado of all places, the government, from my understanding in reading this article, and I haven't done it in depth into the court case, but from my understanding reading the article and slightly going over the court case, was a law that was passed that would have prohibited this person's company from being able to write what they wanted to write. Now, everything that we've talked about, imagine if you were told you had to say Merry Christmas, right? You both of you are like, hey, we're not Christian. Imagine if you could be prosecuted because you were told you had to. It's kind of the same thing. So I'll get to both of those because I think they're really interesting. But coming back to this one, I'm going to read this to you. And this comes from the Daily Signal. And it says, I'm reading just a paragraph from it. It says, and the gentleman's name, so to give you a preference, so this was another same-sex couple that went to a florist that wanted some arrangements for a wedding that they were having. And one of the person's name, I'm trying to find it for just 1 second, Rob Ingersoll, was a long-time customer of this flower shop and knew the owner very well. So I'll start off with this paragraph. It says, Rob often came into to Arlene's Flowers to order floral arrangements for holidays or special occasions. In 2013, Rob asked the owner to design flowers for his same-sex wedding. The owner explained that her Christian faith prevented her from creating special arrangements for such a wedding, but gave Rob recommendations for 3 other florists. The 2 friends hugged and concluded their conversation on friendly terms. Rob's partner, Kurt, wrote a post on Facebook explaining the conversation between Rob and the flower shop. And then Washington Attorney General Bob Ferguson, and I don't know why it has their political affiliation, but it does, a Democrat, learned about the situation during his first term in office and decided to file a lawsuit against the shop. Now, to me, that's a great example of politics getting in the way of, it sounds like, two people who like each other, that respected each other, and didn't have a problem with either one of them until a politician got involved and tried to make a case out of this, what seems to be maybe a slight disagreement or even a request between friends that were declined. I thought that was interesting.
Well, and in Washington State, I'm assuming, the article points out it's a Democrat. If it were in the left-west, is that what we call it? Left or Midwest. If it were in the left or Midwest, it would be Republican, right? I mean, we know why they add that, because right now division sells. Division sells. Division right. is what is driving so much of what's happening. Division is, I don't know. I guess, what is it going to take for us to get to a space where there's crappy people. There are crappy people, right? There are people who are going to do crappy things. Why can't we, I don't know. I guess I just cannot figure out why it has to be so black and white. Why everything has to be, if you're not with me, you're against me. If you know what I mean? Like, if you disagree with me, you're obviously evil. You know what I mean? And that's almost where it's gotten to. If I'm not a Republican, I am the devil. And I have people who literally have told me that I am going to burn in hell because of a vaccination. You know what I mean? Like, and it's terrible. I did find an article, just since we are talking politics, I found an article that there are 7 states in this country who have it in their state constitution that if you profess to be an atheist, you are not allowed to hold public office. It's not enforced, but that is still on the books, that if you are an atheist, you cannot hold public office. And it's all because of something that was said in the 1600s by, I don't know, I can't remember the name of the guy, but he said a person who does not profess faith can't be trusted. And it's like, how do we still have that? How is that a thing? Why aren't you allowed to believe what you want to believe and me believe what I want to believe and that just be okay? Why does it have to cross over and infringe on someone else?
Well, and I see your point, but that doesn't really get me kind of fired up just because you said they're not being enforced. So to me, this kind of falls into the same category as, what is it? Like, you can't, like, it's illegal in some cities to kiss a horse or something like that. You know, there's always these weird little things that are on the books that nobody really enforces.
That's true. But Mahlon, think about it. How many of our politicians profess it's a litmus test? It still is a litmus test. The majority of our representatives profess Christianity on some level. And not very long ago, if you didn't profess Christianity as your faith base, there was no way you were going to get elected.
Yeah, it's the Christians.
Yeah, that's true.
Christians hold a significant portion of political offices.
I would say we used to. I think tides are changing.
Christian perspectives are frequently represented in policy discussion. And many politicians openly express Christian beliefs.
Well, how many of them do that, though, to get a vote?
Yeah, but that's the indicator right there, though. They're professing to be Christians to get a vote. That is not persecution. That is getting a leg up for professing to be Christian.
I didn't say that was a form of persecution. I'm just saying, but there's a lot of people.
But that's what goes against, like, that. That is a perfect example against why I feel like that it's just kind of bullshit, like to claim that Christians are persecuted, because that is a leg up. That Tim Tebow got drafted 25th in the draft, and he was a shit quarterback. I bet it was because he had a lot of publicity because of kneeling and praying because he was Christian. It had
Tim
nothing to
Tebow,
do with his talent. Tim
if
Tebow,
Tim
you
Tebow-
suck.
if Tim Tebow is listening, you're welcome to come on and talk about any of this with us on the radio.
But seriously, I think that it's here's the bottom line of what I'm saying. I think that a lot of Christian persecution that is perceived as persecution, I think is a defense mechanism from those who have felt persecuted by Christians themselves. And the reason I bring that down and that I try to boil it down to that is because I know that Mahlon, that you have something to say about that, about yourself. Because the last time we had this conversation in a hypothetical way, you started to talk about it and I cut you off because I wanted you to talk about it on recording. Okay? Christians often make people feel like they are bad people because they don't believe the same. Christians often are aggressive in professing their faith, in telling people that you're not Christian, you're going to hell. You're not Christian, you're a bad person. And I remembered you started telling me about how that's not okay.
So Ben, I just want to make sure that I'm, and you're right, and we'll get into that because I think that's a really important thing, because I think you're going to find from a Christian's point of view, from my point of view, because I can't speak for all Christians, but from my point of view, there is this almost mentality of I'm a Christian, so I think I'm better than you. Now, trust me when I say my past self, there's been many a time when I have demonstrated that I thought I was better than somebody because I was a Christian, and that is not the right thing to do. So I am here to say, for Mahlon White, that is something that I should have never done. You're absolutely correct. But that doesn't mean that what I'm saying isn't true. It might mean that what I'm focusing on isn't the right thing to focus on. And so I think as a Christian, one of the things that I get almost all the time is somebody just hears that I'm a Christian. Oh, you think you're better than me? You think that you're perfect? Quit looking down at me from your high horse. Now, trust me when I say there are situations and circumstances that I've done that I've deserved that. But that's just getting out of the gate. That's just somebody meeting me, knowing the only thing about me is that I'm a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
I think the world needs to understand that Christians are flawed, just like everybody else. Christians are not perfect. Christians do not have their lives all together. We have messy family dynamics. We have messy relationships. We still sin. So what we constitute sin. And sometimes that makes us a hypocrite because we know what God's teachings are that we're trying to share, but that doesn't mean we always follow those 100%.
But I think the point is that while other people need to realize that Christians are flawed, and I'm not using this as a blanket statement for all of them, because clearly you've done some introspective investigation on this for yourself. Maybe Christians need to realize that they're also flawed, because I think that part of the reason why so many people feel so persecuted by Christians is because so many Christians feel like they aren't.
So, and I can't address all of those feelings, but I can guarantee you in one statement, I can make both of you probably angry. And that's because of my belief around a certain topic. And it's not that I hate either one of you. It's not that I hate the people that do this action. It's because I believe it goes against my belief and my religion and the sanctity of life and everything you want to say. But there's also a point in which you cannot water down the truth. And so sometimes when you speak the truth, it hurts people, and that's not the intention, but sometimes that happens.
Well, I mean, perceived truth.
Well, but again,
that's Jamie's specialty, is perceived
right.
truth.
But again, and that's where the chasm lies, I think, in all of this. Is it's hard for, I think, non-Christians to see the persecution that happens. Even, again, I'm the first to say, in the United States, we're not talking people are being beheaded here yet. I think it's coming. I don't know how long it's going to take, but whatever. But I think it's easy for people who are not Christians to not see the persecution, so therefore it doesn't exist. It would be the same thing as me telling Jamie, and we've done this before, Jamie, there's equality for women. You've arrived. There's nothing else that you need to achieve. I see no equality for women anywhere. Well, that's easy for me to say because I'm not a woman, right? And some of the stuff that we've talked about, I will never understand because I've never had to go through it. Same thing I think is for a Christian. I think non-Christians look at it and say, well, what are you being persecuted about? Because they don't see it. They don't live it. They don't get the responses or the reactions that you get when people find out that you're a Christian. So I think I think that we do have to be aware that I think people that are non-Christian, it's going to be hard for you to see that persecution because you don't live it.
That's a very fair point. That's a fair point. I think, I guess for me, the thing that I'm taking away from this conversation is how similar the effect is. And it doesn't matter what side of it you're on. I think that there are Christians who feel like they have been persecuted because of their belief, and that there are people who feel that they have been persecuted by Christians because of their non-belief. And the effect is the same. And so I think for me, I'm taking away today an understanding I wasn't sure I was going to come away with, but except persecution is bad. I mean, obviously, that's the thing. And I guess a drive for me and a constant goalpost, I guess, for me is how on earth do we as people in the most advanced society in the world, at the most incredible time to be alive in the world, how do we be better people to each other? I don't know that no amount of technical advancement, no amount of amazing innovation that comes in this time can change anything if we don't, as people, learn to be better to each other. And that's, at the end of the day, that's how we get rid of persecution for anyone, right? Is just to be better people to each other. How do we be better people to each other? And this conversation was not nearly as awkward as I thought it was going to be. So thank you for that, guys. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I do want to bring up before we close, because I kind of see that you're closing this.
I'm trying.
I know.
And you do this to me all the
thing.
time. Like, as we wrap up, actually, Jamie, I have one more thing.
Yeah, because, well, to be fair, before you started closing us down, I did say I have one more article I want to share. And I think
I didn't hear that.
This one is a doozy because I'm not going to bother. I'll just read the excerpt, but I tell you, this one had to do with, her name was Lori. She has a website. She makes websites. It's in Colorado. I'm paraphrasing because I'm trying to hurry through it. But I'm going to read this to you because I think this is really important. Because Lori saw the law that happened that was put into motion by Colorado because of the Jack story and because of the florist. She was kind of talking with friends, family, pastor of her church. And they said, you should maybe get in front of this before something happens, because what happens if a same-sex couple comes into your establishment? What are you going to do? Because they have these cases they're working through. So Lori, and I didn't even know you could do this. It was a preemptive case. Is basically she brought it to Colorado. No person had come to her yet, so she didn't deny service to anybody. She just said, hey, there's this law on the books that I think could impact me and my business because of my faith. So she brought a preemptive case to the state of Colorado. And I thought, when we talk about persecution, this is the paragraph that I was kind of hanging my hat on. It says, while Lori is incredibly thankful for the great victory at the Supreme Court because ultimately she won, the personal cost she endured throughout this process was also great. For the day her case was filed, Lori was deluged with hate mail, cruel telephone calls, death threats, constant hacking attempts, false Facebook accounts designed to look like her business page, and a fervent wishes for her to contract cancer. She's lost clients and friends, and several colleagues denounced her and drifted away. And she didn't turn any customer away. She just said, this law that Colorado passed has the right to tell me what I can and cannot say on the subject. And that's what she fought against. And I thought it was interesting to kind of capture what she had to go through for no other reason other than she just wanted to make sure she had the right as a Christian to be able to be able to direct her business in the way she wants to direct it. And there was no customers that she turned away. I have to reiterate that. But yet, look at all of the anger that came out of the internet, her community, whatever you want to call. I found like that was a good example of that. To me, is Christian persecution in today's modern America, right there in black and white.
Except that there's no guarantee that it's Americans. I mean, if we're being honest, especially like with the hacking thing, the vastest majority of hackers come from Russia.
Maybe, but telephone calls, death threats. I mean,
yeah. I think, either way, it's crap. Leave somebody alone. Like if you're pissed off that they're not going to serve gay customers, then don't buy anything from their business. Plain and simple. Like, let your dollar speak and go spend it somewhere else. That's the beauty of free will. I have a hard time seeing that just being just random people for no reason, unless it was publicized in a way that made it look like she was being more venomous than she was. Which, again, I don't know when it was or how long ago or whatever. But
yeah, let me look here. This I'd have to go look to see when the case was filed, but this article was written. Come on.
Yeah, the article is going to be kind of stifled by AP style. The thing to keep in mind is that a lot of the way that people feel about things isn't AP style written articles. It's what they see on Facebook. It's what they see on Instagram. It's what they see on TikTok. It's what they see on all of these social media platforms, and what they're being told by other people around them. So, well, as an example with the Tim Tebow thing, a lot of people thought that the Tim Tebow kneeling thing was about him kneeling for his beliefs during the national anthem, and that everybody said it was okay, and that Colin Kaepernick is being unjustly, persecuted. Well, that argument was never made. Nobody had ever said anything about that. That is something that 14 years ago was a thing, and now it's being brought up again in a different light. And it's all because of what the current climate is in social media. So, like, what the people were saying about that on social media at the time, I feel like is more important than what an article says, because the article is more likely to give you facts, whereas what people read from their friends and colleagues and things like that is a little less likely to be factual.
Yeah, it looks like the attorney, just to give some context to this, it says in September of 2021, the ADF attorneys filed an appeal, and then the Supreme Court decision was done in December of 2022. So, just to give some context, a couple of years old.
A couple of years ago. Yeah. See, and I don't know, I guess I don't remember seeing anything about that.
Well, I'm
personally.
sure, and that's, we can wrap this up, but that's another, to me, suppression is also another form of persecution, is that you don't hear about these things, but they happen. They're not mainstream. They don't make the splash like they used to. Again, to step into the political realm for just a second, some of the things, and I can say for both candidates, but some of the things that are coming out of the campaign trails, you go back 20, 25 years ago, would have ended their political career.
Right.
Now, we just skip on by. So,
yeah.
I think we have to look at a society. We've lost some of that, some of that desire to hold people's feet to the fire, and things that used to make a splash no longer make a splash. And if you stay within the Christian vein, I could concede, or I can consider that to be a little bit of persecution, because what's the best way to make something not a big deal? is you don't talk about it.
Right.
So,
Well, I also, something else you said sparked for me. Just because you have the right to say it doesn't mean you should. And I think a big old dose of that on all kinds of platforms would go a long way to helping some of this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've enjoyed our conversation, Ben. I don't know where you stand now, if you think Christian persecution happens more or less, or if you're still kind of in that camp. But I do appreciate having the time and the opportunity to talk about it. Because again, a lot of people don't want to talk about this, or want to put any kind of, time to even try to unpack some of these ideas. And I enjoyed myself. I thought this was a really great, productive conversation.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Sometimes it's nice to get away from movies every now and again, but I think after this and a little bit of a break, I'm going to scurry back to my comfort zone.
Yeah.
Well, I hope this isn't the last time we see you at the round table, because I still am in awe of your deep voice. I wish I've been trying to get mine to go down that low, but to no prevail.
It's if you want to know the honest truth, Mahlon, just get a Go XLR and let me do all the manipulation on it, and I can make you sound like Morgan Freeman. I'm
going to take you up on that, Ben. I really am.
Now, Ben, why don't you go ahead and plug your show?
Oh, geez, I couldn't even tell you what all the names are or anything, but for the most part, generally just look for Movie RX on just about any platform. The logo is all the same. It's a film strip with Movie RX right in the middle of it. At least for now. Season 2, I think, is going to bring something different. So,
what's your tagline?
Movies is medicine, basically. Yeah, that's kind of my shtick.
Where Ben prescribes entertainment one movie at a time.
Yep. And sometimes it's not even for medicinal stuff. Sometimes it's just for fun, because really sometimes just talking about a movie can be kind of medicinal. So
that is why I love being on your show. Yeah,
it's a lot of fun to listen to.
So I guess in closing, I do just want to say, if you are personally in a space where you feel like you are being persecuted for whatever reason, sometimes that feels pretty hot, like Mahlon was talking about. And I do hope you can reach out to someone close to you and talk about it and make sure that you get support that you need, because it can be a very lonely place, and you deserve to have support. So please make sure you're taking care of yourselves. And thanks for joining us today on this episode of Roundtable Mindset. We hope to see you next time.
Bye, everyone.